Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by PILMA. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have a treat for you. We're going to talk about something we've never really talked about before in the last 3 years, and it's about money. And not just making money, but borrowing money and what it means and the pros and the cons and all the different things that are going on there. Because today we have a special guest, and I do mean special because I've had so much trouble getting her on air. Not her fault, my fault, and I apologize. Mirena Umizaj.
Umizaj, but yes, you're very close.
Umizaj.
That's okay.
Mirena Umizaj.
It's the Eastern European. You got it. That's perfect.
Yep,
the Eastern European names are not easy.
Especially for a Southern drawl. So tell me a little bit about your company, Mirena Company, and just tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure.
Your story. Tell me your story.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm honored. I have known about you for many, many years, and I have gone to PILMA a couple of times, not enough times, but maybe that'll change after this podcast. But Mirena Umizaj is my name. I've been in the legal business for 13 years. I started out working in the settlement planning world, which is, the annuities, the MSAs, the liens, the QSFs. And then from there, I kind of caught that first wave of money coming into the legal business, which was during the BP oil spill. And we found that a lot of the firms that were traditionally funded by banks were really suffering because banks don't necessarily extend large lines of credit, especially if a firm is, representing 30, 40,000 people. And so these firms were having trouble just staying in business and paying their employees. And capital was seen as a necessary evil. It was new, but it was absolutely important and necessary for these firms to stay in business. So I caught that wave and I deployed a couple $100 million right out of the gate. And that was pretty fun. And the money was good, but I didn't learn every lesson during those initial deployments. I learned a lot of lessons as those facilities matured, as these firms seasoned with outside capital, and learned a lot of lessons about the business side of the law. I'm not a lawyer. I went to school for international relations and grew up in an Eastern European country called Albania, very tiny country next to Greece and close to Italy. But moved here when I was 17, went to school, and never thought I would go into law, really. It just happened. But I love the business side of things in the legal business. And so I decided to become specialized and focused just on that. And my focus shifted from just deploying capital, which you'd think of a typical broker putting money to work, to becoming a consultant. And the reason for that, I think, is because I saw so many of my clients and other lawyers needing guidance for how to not only borrow, but find the right terms and put the money to work and not be over leveraged and bankrupt themselves within 3 or 4 or 5 years. And there's been some examples, but my role is to make sure that doesn't happen with my clients. And so that's what we are. We're a consulting practice helping law firms scale, diversify, and grow.
Yeah. But you do give them, you have access to different money, right? Different types of money.
So the way it works is the law firm is my client, and I will go to 5, 10, 15 capital sources and shop for my client. But that is sort of the last step, because initially we evaluate the firm to make sure that they would, qualify. Then if they're not ready yet, then we spend some time getting them ready for it, because we want to make sure we're presenting squeaky clean, packet of inventory and financials. And sometimes we have to do some cleaning up and get the house in order before we do that. Then we raise the money and stay on with the law firm to properly execute the capital that they've received, because every day from the moment that the money hits their account, the clock is ticking, meaning interest is being accrued. So if it's sitting, it's bad business. If you're not investing it properly or diversifying or growing your inventory, it's bad business. So we just make sure as soon as the money comes in, we know the proper channels to help the law firm optimize its infrastructure and grow their inventory.
So when you go into these law firms and check them out to make sure whether or not they even qualify, like what are the 4 or 5 things that you're looking for, and usually you see some. Well, and then a second question: what are like the 2 biggest things that always see that they don't have right, or a lot of times?
So it's a great question, because there is patterns, right, that start to emerge. And I think the patterns that emerge with lawyers in general, and then I'll divide them in categories, is that, business is an afterthought, right? Because they're lawyers. They went to school, they studied law, they graduated, and they're supposed to be advocates. And the traditional way of practicing law was you open your shop, or you join somebody's shop and you just litigate, right? 8 hours a day. But as this industry has evolved and there is a lot more business components to it, lawyers find themselves out of place in general. So you have to sit down and get them to actually have the awareness to think about their business as their law firm as a business, which is like, sometimes you just see them have a glaze, it's just like, but I'm a lawyer. And I get that. And I respect that. But maybe you need to bring in people to help you, like a CFO or a COO or a CEO, and run that part of your business like a business. So that's the first thing I see in general. But then some are more savvy than others. But to really sort of categorize them, you have what we call the aggregators, which are really good at advertising to get cases, whether it's billboard, radio, TV. And then you have the trial lawyers that sometimes are horrible at advertising. They get most of their cases referrals. And that's the ultimate compliment for a really good lawyer, is to say, I'm so good that other people send me business, I don't need to advertise. And the misconception there is that sharing fees is the most expensive thing you can do, right? It's more expensive than bringing in capital. Capital is just it's an interest rate. You take an expense deduction at the end of the day. And, you're looking at somewhere between effective cost of capital, 8% to maybe 15% if you do things right. Sharing fees is 50% of your fee, right? And so those lawyers are missing out big time, because if they were getting their own cases, they didn't have to pay referrals, so they'd have a mixed docket of both, and they would be making a lot more money. So aggregators and then trial lawyers, right? And what we see with aggregators tend to be better business lawyers. Trial lawyers tend to be less good, right? And so for me, it was perplexing, because I look up to a lot of these lawyers who are getting multi-million-dollar verdicts, multi-billion-dollar verdicts sometimes, but they just don't have their house in order. And so it's very easy to walk in and just say, we got to make some tweaks. We got to completely revamp your firm if you want this to be your business. And if not, you're okay the way it is, then a lot of them just want to do it at their pace. So I get to see, and then there is the hybrids too, of course.
Yeah. So most of these lawyers, I guess the trial lawyers, they're coming to you because they figured out what you already said, is that paying a 50% referral fee is not the best business decision in the world, and they want some money so that they can go out and get more cases. Of course, they gotta have somebody that can get the cases for them, or they can go to companies like, I guess, Broughton Partners and these different ones out there that do it for you. But And then do you actually deal with aggregators too, or they pretty much, do they come in and want money, or are they pretty much set?
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody wants money because they realize it's better using other people's money than their own money, right? And this idea of I don't need financing because I have my own money, I'm successful. Like, you can be very successful, but it's hard to compete in a market where you have capital from Wall Street pouring in, and you just can't keep up, right? It's going to cost you 3 times, 5 times to get the cases that you used to get. And that's assuming, that you're also a good trial lawyer and you've got referral work coming in too. So it's becoming increasingly more difficult to compete for the business, especially the PI, trucking, auto, slip and falls. It's so saturated.
Yep.
The first thing that lawyers, the aggregators, they realize is they need to figure out how to grow the business. And what that means is if they're not good trial lawyers, they will figure out a way to bring in good lawyers that will litigate, that will take cases to trial and completely fund the cost, figure out how to get the cases, build, again, the team, the operations. And so they are the operator. The aggregator is the operator. And then they'll put golden handcuffs, what we call them, on the talent. So they'll go out and they'll find lawyers that just are not interested in running a business. They don't want anything to do with it. And they incentivize them really well. And they put these golden handcuffs on them. And that is a very successful law firm. That's John Morgan in a nutshell. And then you have, the law firms that, the trial lawyers that say, I do want to grow my business. How do I do it? Well, many ways to do it. Sometimes all they're trying to figure out who the players are in the space, who can get me cases, who can get me money, who can help me figure stuff out internally. And it's usually a mess. But what I always tell them is, if you're going to hire people to help you, hire people that are good and specialize in one area, which is if you bring in a CFO, that CFO is going to help you understand your finances in the firm. They're costly, but they're going to save you millions over the years, right? Yeah. I don't know why, but lawyers resist CFOs. They resist somebody from the outside coming in, looking at their books. It's almost like, I don't know what it is. But when I go in, I'm very straightforward. And I say to them exactly what I'm saying to you, which is, I need to see your finances. I need to see how you've conducted business in the last 5 years. I need to see how many times you've gone to trial and what your track record is. And then I can tell you whether or not I can help you. And sometimes I have to turn business down because, again, the pieces don't come together. But I've worked with, tens and tens of lawyers, good trial lawyers that said, you know what, this is not my cup of tea and I do need help. So come in and just take things to the next level. So you have discretion to just clean house and do what you do. So I have a team of 13 and they all specialize. I have an accountant. I have an operations manager. I have a marketing director. I have people that just specialize in different areas. So when we are brought in as consultants, we help bring in all of the resources needed. We hire, train, put all the people in place, bring in the inventory, raise the capital, and just allow the lawyer to be the lawyer that they need to be.
So when you, so you're just like a one-stop shop. You can go in there and so I'm sure you charge a fee for that. I would. It work, it work for free. No such thing as free lunch.
Well, our services are not cheap, but when we're bringing in the capital and we have the business plan that works and has been tried over and over again, nobody hesitates to pay it because they have nothing to lose. So
yeah, and this and the deal is, what the lenders are looking for.
That's right.
So you're not going to waste their time. If you go in there and you can't do it, you're not going to waste your time.
That's right.
And then the other side of this thing is some of these lenders, and I want to talk about that more. So say somebody gets in there, you look at it, They go in there, you do a little cleanup, 6-12 months. Then you go out and start looking at money. Okay. Is this money with recourse or without recourse? Meaning, have they got to guarantee it, or does the cases stand on it?
Both. Yeah. You have all kinds of money out there and people make up terms as they go. It's hilarious because, part of my job is to talk and meet with different lenders every month and figure out what's going on in their business. How much money do they have to put to work? Because every time they raise money, the mandate changes. So the terms change, right? So if I was able to raise $5 million 5 months ago at 18%, now it's 5 million at 24%, just a different mandate and a different source of where the money's coming from. And sometimes it's blended. So I have to be very educated about where the money's coming from, what the terms are, who the personalities are, right? These people that make these decisions, most of them know nothing about lawyers or how the law world works, right? So I have to educate them on my client. And it takes me time to do that. But essentially, once the lender says, here's an offer or what we call a term sheet, those term sheets can vary significantly. And some say, look, it's going to be full recourse. We are not going to waste our time to say it's non-recourse because at the end of the day, it is all recourse money. So think about this. And there's a lot of misunderstanding in the community about what recourse versus non-recourse means. If you're a lawyer with 30 cases and they're all single event cases, and let's say you have 3 other lawyers in your team that are working those cases with you, what are the chances that you're going to lose all 30 cases?
Slim.
Right. So when we say non-recourse, it means really nothing, because when they're doing underwriting, they're going to look at your potential future fees, and they're only going to advance you somewhere between 20 and 30%. So there's plenty of margin there. So if you lose 15 cases or 20 cases, you can actually still pay the loan back. You'll walk away with nothing, but you're going to pay the loan back, right? So really, they're very smart about the way they underwrite these loans. Now, there has been plenty of times that they have overfunded firms, got too excited, and then they had to walk it back, or, things happened, right? But most of the transactions I've done and what I've seen in the market is the underwriting is on their side. Like, they know what they're doing. So non-recourse means, unless the only time non-recourse is actually real is if a firm has 10,000 cases of the same, say it's a mass tort, and it's RoundUp. And for whatever reason, all of those cases are thrown out.
Like Zantac. Like
Zantac, exactly. Zantac is a great example. So if a law firm, all they had was Zantac cases, and they had a facility of $5 million at non-recourse, that non-recourse provision will kick in. But very rarely do lenders fund law firms with one case, because they know the risk associated with that. So again, as I tell my lawyers, recourse versus non-recourse, when I'm looking at their inventory, throw it out the window. It means nothing. Because you have a track record of 10 years, 15 years, 30 years of trying cases. You've made money traditionally. You're still going to make money. Like, you're not going to lose.
So you mentioned a couple of law firms earlier that went bankrupt. So what caused them to go bankrupt?
Well, some lawyers are just terrible at putting money to work. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? What they do is they borrow money. They go out and get maybe, 20% of that money is advertising, and then they spend the 80% on operations, and they're paying the bills. Well, if you haven't grown your inventory, which is how you're going to make more returns, and you're spending it just to stay alive and pay the bills, now you just really didn't make a dent in the growth. You didn't grow your business necessarily. And a lot of, lenders, they'll have some general provisions of how the money should be spent, but they can't dictate how a lawyer spends the money. They have faith that the lawyer will go out and do the right thing, which is get as many cases as you can, continue running the operation so that in 24 months, the inventory has doubled or tripled.
Yeah. So like getting 10 million and go spending 5 million for a jet and then spend, that's the kind of stuff that can bankrupt you.
That's right.
But a lot of times I remember banks, not in law firms, but they would, if they had millions of dollars out, they would want to look at your books, have access to your books, see how your cash flow is going, like on a monthly or quarterly basis. Do these lenders for these law firms do that or not?
Absolutely, they do that. I mean, look, the banks, they do give lines of credits, but they can't evaluate cases. So they don't look at cases as assets. What the asset to them is the building, if the lawyer owns the building, the lawyer's track record. So meaning how much money has that lawyer made traditionally, 3-5 years. And then they take a very low end average of what this person is worth and their business is worth and extend a line of credit. I mean, the average line of credit to a law firm is $500,000.
Really?
Yes, in the country. And very, very few firms, I'm talking very few firms, like 1% of the firms have access to over $1 million. It's really tough. I mean, you've got big law firms that say, oh, my bank will give me money at 3% or, whatever, right? But those firms are firms that are, bringing in like $100 million, $200 million a year, right? So rightfully so, the bank is going to extend them more money. But everybody else, what are you going to do with $500,000, right? Are you going to advertise? Are you going to operate? There is feast or famine in this business all the time. So what's $500,000? So really, that's why the Wall Street money started coming in, is because the banks could not meet the demand. The demand was high. Attorneys wanted more money. They wanted to litigate for longer periods of time at times, but they couldn't do that. So when this money came in, even though it was expensive, it was an opportunity for lawyers to get more cases and grow their firm more than ever before, and litigate for a longer period of time. But the lenders in that realm, right, also do their underwriting. So they look at your balance sheet, your income statement, your 3-4 years of tax returns, your inventory, and they're very good at putting value, dollar value on your cases, every case at a time. So they're very thorough.
Yeah. When I started my law firm, started advertising, it was in 96. There was nothing. I mean, there really wasn't. I mean, the banks wouldn't do anything. It didn't matter. So I went and got all the real estate I had and got a $500,000 line, which is funny because you said $500,000. That's why I kind of smiled when you said that. Because that's the line of credit I got in 1996 and went on TV. And of course, they had to I had to personally guarantee it, plus put up probably $1 million worth of real estate, to be honest with you.
Right.
I mean, they were double covered, but you got to do what you got to do because I didn't have any choice. There was no choices. So what are the choices now? I mean, what's out there? I mean, I know we got like Esquire Bank and you got Advocate Capital and different companies like that, but then you got this big money, right? This hedge money, this Wall Street money.
I mean, look, there is unlimited money available. Like, really, it's easy to access. Anybody can do it. You don't need me to access it. I can help you make sure you're educated if you don't know what you're looking for. But really, somebody that's been around for a number of years and they, are good lawyers and they have cases. Remember, these lenders leverage your case inventory. They don't take your home and your building. They don't care about that. They only care about the cases, which is good because you don't necessarily have to personally guarantee, which a lot of people like. But there is money coming from all kinds of sources. And it's important to ask questions. Where is the money coming from, right? How are you being financed? Because some of the lenders that come in, never heard of them, no idea who they are. You also have private investors that say, oh, wait a second, the legal world is not directly related to the economy, that there is actually data showing that there is less risk in the legal world than there is in the economy. Well, let me put $500 million into this because I know I'm going to get at least 15% return, right? And that's low end. Most of them make way more. So it's very lucrative for these folks. So the big money is here and is here to stay. And with Arizona and DC allowing lawyers and non-lawyers to partner, what you will see, I think, and this is my prediction, is that you will have more non-lawyers, which is capital sources, partner with lawyers to supersize the law firms, go nationwide, and outspend each other, essentially, right? And technology is going to be a big part of that. I think you will see a very clear separation between the lawyers who can, litigate and go into a courtroom and the lawyers that can't. The lawyers that can't will likely be replaced easily. The lawyers that can, there is a need for them. And I think their opportunities are going to be greater than ever. So really what I tell my clients is if you're not the trial lawyer in the firm, you better go out there and find the best talent there is to try those cases and pay them so well that they never want to leave you, because that's your only chance to stay in business, right? And lenders are smart because they're not going to fund a law firm without a trial lawyer. They're not going to fund aggregators, right? An aggregator is going to get an average fee of $15,000 at best. A trial lawyer, $35,000 average fee, right? So they're being smart. That's why I think lawyers need to really rethink how they do business and how they litigate their cases or what their business model is, because it's going to be harder to be competitive and stay ahead of the game, especially in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I was speaking at the Business of Law deal NTL did out in Arizona last year. And after that deal, they had a meeting of the, what do you call that stuff? The non-lawyer. And
the ABS, the alternative business structure.
They had a meeting in that same building. And I just kind of moseyed in there. And one of the guys that was at the thing said, "Oh, come on in, can you sit down?" And I'm sitting there listening to this, and they got lists of like 60 law firms that have already been formed in Arizona and more, and then what they're dealing with and how they got to deal with this and deal with that. These were the guys in there, and there was more non-lawyers than there were lawyers. There were guys in there. I mean, they looked very smart. I mean, they look like bean counters to me.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there taking notes, and looks like you got to have a lawyer out there. I know you got to have a lawyer to go with, but then you got to have another lawyer help you get through the process. But they're especially lawyers that help you get through that whole process of getting approved. My question to you, because it seems like you're on top of this more than most people. How, there's just in Arizona. So how are they going to be able to make money in North Carolina or South Carolina? I mean, are they going to go digital and internet and just get cases, and then how are they going to do it? I mean, because that's the part that I'm not sure about. I mean, I know there's some ways around it, and I'm sure they figured it out before they put millions of dollars in it. But I just wonder what you're hearing.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think most capital sources that are starting, law firms out of Arizona, they're partnering with a law firm somewhere. Right. They're doing what we call equity deals. So up to now, 98% of the transactions have been what we call debt structure deals. With Arizona, you're going to have equity deals. What that means is the capital comes in and tells a lawyer, look, you're a good lawyer. You're in South Carolina, North Carolina, and I can put 50 million behind you. You could market, you'll be the only one dominating for the next 5 years. What we want in return is 80% of the fees, right? That's the deal. So now the lawyer has to think, okay, I could be on my own and put $500,000 a year, right? Or I can bring these people who are business savvy. They can help me run the operation, bring the capital, own the market. I'm the face of the business, but I'm going to have to pay them 80%. Now, it's not quite, I'm kind of emphasizing, I'm saying 80% for a reason here, because I think the trend is it started out, hey, let's give them 30%, and they wanted 40%. Now they want 50%. I've seen 60%. I've seen 70%. So the trend is clear. They're going to want more share because they're putting in more money into these joint ventures. And so what I'm afraid might happen in the short term is exactly what happened to the healthcare world, which is it's franchised, right? So you're going to have lawyers working for hedge funds, right? And the good lawyers who can get the big verdicts can negotiate a better fee split, so to speak, for themselves. The lawyers that don't really they just need the money to stay alive. So I think, I think that's where it's headed. And my goal is to educate law firms sooner than later, allow them to cut the right kinds of deals early on, be well positioned. So when all of this hits, and I think there's going to be probably a perfect storm between tech and capital, and I think capital is going to own tech because it's already investing in tech and in the legal world big time. Yeah. That through the tech, they're going to come in and they're just going to be able to run these firms, and lawyers, essentially will have to work for these firms if they still want to be lawyers.
Yeah, that's kind of sad. But you might very well be right. I mean,
I hope I'm wrong.
Huh? I know, I do too. Yeah. I'm just, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, here's the deal. Back when I don't know if you remember when Finkelstein sued a couple to state. I mean, I think he sued New York and sued in another federal court, and he wasn't successful, but trying to get non-lawyer ownership. I went back and researched over in Australia and England, and they still only have like 32% of the market. I mean, there still was a lot of law firms out there operate, but I know there are a lot smaller countries. I know they're not as rich as the United States and everything like that. And there was a big bankruptcy, and that bankruptcy was the biggest one out there. And they had paid too much. Basically, what happened? They paid too much. I can't remember. It's been 5 or 6 years ago, but the article was they paid too much, and no matter how smart they were, they paid too much. And when you pay too much, it don't matter. Can't get your ROI, right? So I don't know. I mean, I look at that and I say, well, maybe it's not as bad as everybody thinks it's going to be. But then I think about this tech, and I like the fact about the U.S. is always, and that was 20 years ago, 15, and now things have changed. Because 20 years ago, there's probably less than $300 or $400 million a year being spent on TV by lawyers. Now it's bids. So things change, right? I mean, when I went on TV in '96 with that $500,000, I went from 20 cases a month to 120 cases a month. Now, if I did that, it would take me 18 months to 2 years. It probably couldn't even do it with $500,000 in the Raleigh-Durham market, because back then that put me at number 2. Now, that kind of money would probably put me at number 7 or 8, which is not a big market share. So things do change. I don't know. I mean, I guess it all has to play out.
It has to play out, and I think a balance has to be struck, because the other aspect is, for me, which is, again, I'm not a lawyer, but for me, because I work in this business and I care about this business, the worry is if we have this kind of capital coming in and just wiping out, right? They're just buying law firms, consolidating, merging, all of the stuff. Then it's really sometimes it's the same, almost the same companies that are being sued, right? They're also investing in the legal business, and that
Right.
conflict of interest. Because
Right.
I mean, the big
Hedging the
funds are
bets.
the big funds, right? And then you've got this collusion, this mix of, what's going to happen to the justice system. So I think some regulation is important. There has been no real regulation on litigation finance, but I think it's important to preserve the integrity of justice in this country. I mean, it affects the fundamental rights of the consumer. So I think to prevent Wall Street taking over and then just kind of playing the cards in their favor, where you're suing in one hand and they're profiting on the other hand because they're making so much money on fees. There's got to be a balance there. But I sometimes, as you know, there is no regulation or there is no real change until sometimes something bad happens or
something blows up.
Something blows up, right? And so hopefully it doesn't have to get to that point. I have a podcast too, and I had Mike Papantonio on, and we were just talking about the future of the business. And he is just mad at the capital sources. He's mad at lenders, and they're telling lawyers what to do and how to do it, and rightfully so. So he said, I'm going to go out and sue all of them. And I said, look, you can, as long as you can, stay in business litigating them, right? So you don't run out of money, you can, but those pockets are so deep that they don't care throwing $100 million at litigating something and lobby and do all the things they need to do. So we just have to be, I think, careful, aware, and lawyers, especially whoever tunes in, that's like a lawyer that likes law and wants to be a lawyer and wants to figure out how to thrive. I would say my advice is just figure out how to be a really good lawyer and a really good businessman. And if you can't do both, bring people that can help you. Yeah. And that way you will stay ahead, and chances are capital is going to want to work with you, and you've got to use it. You can't resist it because it's here and it's here to stay. And make sure that however you're positioned in a way that you're here to stay long term, right? And so that's my advice. And we don't know what's going to happen, but awareness is good.
So is there anything I didn't ask you I should ask you, or something that we need to cover that I missed?
I mean, your audience is what, typically single event attorneys, PI?
Mostly. I got a few that are mass tort guys, but most of them are, there's some big ones and then there's some small ones.
Right.
Anywhere, from $500,000 a year to $100 million a year. I mean, it's all over the board. It's all over the board.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's what I would say to the PI community. You have to diversify, right? And you have to diversify in different practice areas so that you can have ongoing income coming into the firm. PI, workers' comp, wage and hour loss, product liability, med mal, mass torts, class action. Develop the firm in a way that it's well-rounded so that you have as many practice areas as possible. You have good people positioned in those practice areas, running good volumes so that you always have cash flow coming in, right? Yeah. When you have cash flow coming in, you can access capital without depending on it. You could borrow $5 million and spend $5 million in advertising for all those practice areas. You don't have to depend on capital to pay your monthly burn, your operations, your people. And so that's my advice. And, you know, people have mixed emotions about mass torts. Mass torts is not an area where, you know, you don't want to just do mass torts. Mass torts is something that you do to diversify, because if you invest in 5 mass torts, chances are 1 or 2 are going to pay. And when they do, they make up for the 3 that fail. I work from home and I have a 3-year-old just walking in and out. But so mass torts is just one way to diversify. It's got great returns. And it also, if you're interested, if you're a good PI lawyer and you're a good trial lawyer, what's to say that you can't go and be involved in a mass tort case, be on leadership, try a bellwether case, and get $1 billion verdict, right? Yep. So sky's the limit. So that's really my advice to the PI community. Diversify, don't put your eggs in one basket, and just be smart about your business decisions.
Yeah. One of my mentors a long time ago said, 1 is a very dangerous number. Don't ever have 1 of anything. You know, one vendor, just, you know, 1 practice, 1, you know, 1 is a dangerous number. Well, listen, thank you so much. I know you got to get to your kid, but listen, anybody want to get up with you? Yeah, I love it. Well, how do they do that?
Yeah, I work from home, so you know,
me too. Me too. Me too.
Well, thank you for having me on. This was fun.
Yeah. So it's called MirenaCompany.com.
Mirena Company. Yep, MirenaCompany.com. You got it.
All righty. And that's Mirena.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Okay. All righty.
You got it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken. I'll see you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
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 You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.